Welcome to another episode. I am so excited for this because we're going to get back to storytelling, which, if you have been listening to the podcast, you know that it has been a storytelling podcast from the very beginning. Today, with me is my good friend and client and student, Rebecca. We've been working together since 2021, but we've been friends for long before that. She has had a huge spiritual awakening these past few years. And now she's just starting to do intuitive or tarot and oracle card readings and helping people in so many different ways. And I feel like it's really important to highlight her story and her transformation process and where she is now because everybody is always growing and evolving and transforming. But the big thing is that so many people right now are feeling called to more spiritual pursuits or helping and serving and supporting other people in deeper ways and in different ways than they have before. And so, this point in the journey where we just start is so important. I've had so many guests where they've been doing this work for 5, 10, 20 years that they're doing, and it's amazing to see and listen to stories that are from down the road. But this turning point, or like when the tides shift, is so poignant and so passionate and so important. And I know that there are so many people out there that are listening that are in this place too. So thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here and being that example and sharing your inspiration and courage and everything with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Me too. So I just want to start out because obviously your journey is very intuition based. And I feel like that's something that not everybody has had really the courage or the self conviction to trust in. And I know that you didn't always start out as like an intuitive reader. I know that you were a school teacher before and everything when I first met you and so many different things. So I just want to kind of start out by explaining the intuitive gifts, and then you tell me which ones you feel you have and how they really supported you in your life. So we have typically 9 different intuitive or clair abilities. We have clairvoyance, which is intuitive seeing, clairsentience, which is feeling, claircognizance, which is knowing, clairaudience, which is hearing, clairtangency, which is touch, so like touching things, and usually clairtangency works hand in hand with another intuitive ability. Like if you touch an object and you can see the person or smell a different like environment or something like that. Clair dreaming, which is self-explanatory. Clair gustance or gustance, which is intuitive taste. Clair empathy, which is that sensing, and especially with energy. But there's so many different empathic abilities that could go into. And then clairalience, which is intuitive smelling. So which of those kind of sound like you? And how have they shown up in your life, even before you were doing intuitive work?
Yeah, so definitely the claircognizance, the clair knowing, um, that one's been big, and I've just realized it like recently, thinking back to my childhood and like teen years. There's things that have happened in my life now. Like, for example, I always had when I was younger, like a fascination with twins and things like that, like twins and just being a twin, like what it would be like to have a twin, like, and I didn't know if that was just because I was an only child but now, like, I have 4-year-old twins. So it's like, I don't know if that was just me like preparing and just knowing, like my soul knowing I was going to have twins in my life. And even when I was pregnant with them before I went to my first like prenatal and knew that there were twins, I told my husband, I was like, I'm eating for 3. Like I would always just say that just joking around, and because his dad's a twin, was a twin, and his mom's side has twins, but my side doesn't. They say it's the mother's side. But I would always joke like, oh, I'm eating for 3. And then um we went there and right away they're like, oh, there's 2 there. And I was like, no way. Like I feel like I always knew, even if I didn't logically believe it, like I always knew there was something with that. So definitely the knowing, clear knowing. And then I feel like I get these two confused, like the feeling and the empathy. because I definitely feel like I could feel others' emotions, and that was something I struggled with for a long time. Like, if I'd be around somebody that was in a bad mood, I'd be in a bad mood. So it was
Mm,
hard to like learn to put that boundary up to like, that's not my energy, that's not my feelings. So that was something else. So I definitely think those two for sure.
yeah. I mean, you're definitely an empath. You're so
Yeah.
empathic. You've always have been. You just have this heart of gold and this naturally like nurturing, caring, like safe healing type of energy. And it definitely sounds like Claire empathy. I feel like Claire sentience, it can definitely come up in that too. But a lot of times Claire sentience or the intuitive feeling will be like just having this like the gut feelings, you know what I mean? Are like where your stomach kind of like turns at certain things and you just have that,
Yeah.
like other intuitive things come up too. Um, and so I feel like maybe both of those are even showing up. So like all three for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, that's really awesome. And I do remember also, I don't know if you feel um, okay sharing about this or not, but also our chats around being kids in quote unquote haunted houses and you just
Yeah.
kind of having these feelings too. Do you want to kind of share around that too?
Yeah. Like just our house, my house that I grew up in was it's a very old house. And there would just be like weird things that would happen. Like things like I would hear things moving and like there'd be mail there that wasn't there before, like just things like that. Like it was just a weird, and even my parents are like, "Oh, the ghost is here." Like they always joke about that. Like we have one of those touch lamps, and it's in like our window, like right when you walk in the door, but nobody usually goes up in that room, but you could see it, and like that light would just randomly be on, and it's like, how did that turn on? Nobody's been
Wow.
there. So
Wow.
yeah, I definitely think I grew up around spirits and things like that.
Do you feel like that kind of shaped you in any sort of way or made you try to convince yourself like, well, I feel like this is actually happening, but I'm going to tell myself like step into more of that logical or like kind of go into an intuitive denial or just shut down that gift that you have or anything like that?
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, I think when you grow up, like you're thinking like, oh, like that'd be weird if I said that out loud, like when you're a teenager or like in those preteen years, like so yeah, I definitely think it was something that was just like hindering me, just self-doubt.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's shown up a lot, like in your journey to being an intuitive reader and working with other people where like yeah you can like look at cards and have this logical symbolism interpretation and all of that but a lot of it is so much feeling and I know that we've chatted a lot about how you see the cards and you're like the messages I'm getting have nothing to do with this
Yeah.
and like that's when you know it's just pure like channeling or pure intuition and so like has it been a journey trying to trust that for you?
Yeah, even I mean just like intuitively and even just in my life, like that's just a core wound that I've had is self-worth and things. So that's definitely showing up in the work I'm trying to do now. And yeah, I think that was like maybe just a couple weeks ago I messaged you that. I'm like, is that normal? Like I'm like, I feel like I'm a visual learner, so I read the guidebook and then kind of go through things and then I'll start typing and it's like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with what I read, but it's a good message, I think. So it's just I'm gonna still put it out there.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of trust to even be able to be like, okay, well, I'm going to say this and hopefully hopefully it's right. And I feel like that's like every intuitive reader's journey. Like there's always that one at least one in every I don't know, 20, 30 minimum that you're like, should I say this? Like I hope
Yeah.
this makes sense to them because it
Yeah.
doesn't to me.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Well,
sure.
and that's another thing too, like the core wound around self-worth and coming into spiritual work and creating a profession around it and everything. Like it really is hard. And I feel like when we come into just business ownership or entrepreneurship in general, it is one of the most spiritual journeys that could possibly exist, because you are shown everything around you. Are things working? It's because of you. Are things not working? It's because of you. Then you come into more of that, like the spiritual actual work and the intuitive work and all of the feminine wounding that comes up around that, and all of those times where, like, when you're a kid and you're like, that's not real, and like all of those things, like those patterns and those wounds really come up. And so have you felt like that was something that you struggled with even before coming into actual intuitive profession, like when you were a school teacher, or even when you're mothering or anything like that? Does it show up anywhere else in your life?
Oh yeah. I mean, every aspect of my life. That's just like I said, that's like a core wound. It's something I've really had to, and I still struggle with it. I mean, just the self-worth, imposter syndrome, because
Mm.
it's just like you look at all these other, like even as a teacher, I look at all these other teachers and I'm like, they do such a great job. Like, and then it's like I want to live up to that. But then it's like also like, well, you do it in your own way. Nobody's going to be the same. Nobody's going to do things the same. And I mean, even just my relationships, I mean, with other people, with my friends, it's just really been a struggle to just be like, I am worthy of good things. I'm worthy of good friendships. I'm worthy of good relationships. I'm a good mother. Like there's just so many things. And it's just been that pattern in my life that it's definitely one of the core things like I said, I'm still working on it. It's not as deep as it was, but it's definitely still hard. I mean, even
Yeah.
doing the podcast, it's like I listen to so many podcasts. I can't be on a podcast. Why am I worthy of being on a podcast? Like,
Well, first off, hell yeah, you are worthy.
yeah.
Like, we all have a story, and like you said, we all do everything, no matter what we're doing, whether it's in personal life, like being a wife or a mother or a friend or a sister or a freaking human being, even if we're a customer at a waitress or at a waitress at a restaurant, or being a waitress. But like, we all do things so differently. But like, your story absolutely matters. You have been through so much in your life. And I know that, even the hard parts about life, like the hardest things that make your heart just break, that's where those core wounds really show up. So, have there ever been other situations, in your life where that wound that shows up now, even like in this point where your life, where tides are turning and things are shifting, and like dimensions are changing for you and everything? And so even now when that happens, like, do you think of like other times in your life where you've had to really cope with that, and like other moments in time where you have really found deep transformation where that wound has shown up as well?
My relationship, my husband and I, we got together when we were both 21. I was just shy of my 21st birthday. We got married just a short time after that. And so we spent all of our 20s together, like growing up. And I mean, we had a lot of stuff to learn before we probably were meant to be. I'm not saying that we weren't meant to be married. We were meant to be married, trying to think how to word it. I don't know if a lot of relationships would have survived because we were still kids. We were still trying to grow up. We were still trying to find ourselves. And we've done a lot of that work together and separately. So there was many times when I was thinking I wasn't good enough for that kind of relationship and to have a family and to be happy. That's the biggest thing. I I am a I was I'm a recovering self-sabotager. Like
Mm-hmm.
if things feel too good, I gotta find a way to mess it up or kind of going back to my childhood. Well, that's not real. That's not what real life is. Real life isn't good. So that's definitely just been something working through in our like my relationship, even my jobs and everything. I mean, being a teacher, I struggled because, I started as a high school Spanish teacher and then I got put into fourth grade English language arts and just those shifts and things. And I thought, well, I'm not good enough for this spot. Why am I good enough for this spot? So it's just always been that self worth that's been really hard. I
Yeah.
feel like a lot of people struggle with that being feeling worthy, being
Yeah.
deserving. And then when you do get good things, you find a way to make it not your reality.
Or not as good.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like I find a lot of times people are always waiting for the other shoe to drop and kind of coming into this trauma response.
Yes.
And yeah, it gets really intense. And I think that you're right. So many people deal with this. And that's why it's so important to share stories around it. So that first off, we don't feel so alone. Because, like, if we walk into a grocery store, we know the majority of people have probably had similar thoughts, but none of us are talking about it. We're all putting on a facade, or we're all acting like it doesn't matter, making it smaller than it is, or devaluing it about ourselves when that and everything that it entails deserves a seat at the table just as much as our successes and just as much as like all of the other things that we feel are easier to accept around ourselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So how do you cope with that? Because it's a journey, right? Like, I'm not saying that you're in the clear of the woods, but you're absolutely not at the beginning of working with that, because you have such an awareness around it. I know hyper awareness is sometimes just as harmful, but
Yes.
but um you're definitely working on it. And so is there anything that's really helped you in that?
I mean, even as a little girl, I suffered from anxiety, even if I didn't know the word anxiety then. And, anxiety, depression, when I was younger, when I was in my teen years, my angsty teen years, it was just a lot. And I kind of ignored all those feelings for a long time or tried to just push them down or not really deal with them. And after we got married and everything, we wanted to try to start a family and I got pregnant and I got pregnant pretty easily. I was really excited and we went to our first prenatal appointment and we ended up finding out we had an empty sac. So like the sac formed, but there was no baby inside. So I was having all the pregnancy symptoms and everything, but it was empty. Nothing was there. And it was like going from the highest point of my life to the lowest point in a matter of seconds, just as soon as we found out. And that moment kind of just put me right back into like the lowest point I've ever been. Like I was very depressed. I was very self-sabotaging. Just I was hurting. I was hurt and I didn't know how to process being so hurt and feeling like that was my fault. Feeling like something within me was not, and I know that now it wasn't my fault. It happens. It happens way more than people realize. I feel like more people are talking about it now, but we were young. We were probably 25, 26. We'd just gotten married. We're like, we're starting this whole new life and everything's going to be perfect. And you just don't think about that. I've never known of anybody that has told me they had a miscarriage. I didn't think that was very common until after it happened to me. And, you know, that was hard not having tools to deal with things. And so I kind of suffered on this up and down for a long time until I had this spiritual awakening when I went on your retreat. By that time, I'd had all three kids. They were, oh, maybe 4 and 1 at that time. And you'd offered this retreat. And I looked at it as, oh, I get to go away for a couple days alone, like enjoy a pretty place. I love to travel, and that was my intention going on the trip. I was like, just a couple days away, just a couple days. And it ended up being so transformative. I think it was our last night, and we were looking at the stars, and I just started crying. And I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I crying? And I remember everybody just held me and was there for me. And I definitely think that was the point where my soul just like cracked open, and it was like, are you ready to like, oh, don't cry, don't make me cry. Like, are you ready to like heal all these things that you've dealt with that you've just kept down? And I feel like a lot of times people think a spiritual awakening is like love and light and everything's beautiful and let's hug the trees. And it's a lot of work if you are, there's a lot of mainstream in it. But if you're like actually sitting down with yourself and doing the work, it's deep stuff. I mean, you literally have to crack yourself open and take accountability for yourself. And I don't even remember what your question was, but
Well, no, we can even keep talking about that. It was like how you cope with those wounds and how you carry yourself through those heartbreaking and transformational moments. And so this is like a perfect segue into that. And so, when you're on a spiritual journey, you're right, it is hard. Like people always say on mainstream, like on social media, oh, I just got out of my dark night of the soul. And I'm like, you you just get one? like
yeah,
like this must
yeah,
be your first. So
yeah.
like there are dark nights, many
Right.
dark nights of the soul. Like, and for people who are listening and who don't know what a dark night of the soul is, it is that almost like people say, like, you're not in a void or you're not in the darkness, you're planted. And it can feel like that. But and some people are like, you're in a cosmic womb. And like we can make it feel better than it is. But when we're in it, we feel broken, like you said, like just cracked open and raw and vulnerable and so many different things. And that's where the real growth happens. That's where that transformation happens, but it doesn't feel like it. And I mean, I know the phoenix has
Mhm.
been a really big symbol for you, and you even have it tattooed on you and everything, and which is absolutely beautiful. And that is what a spiritual journey is. You fucking crash and burn and become ash, and you rise up again and you have the full life cycle, and then you keep repeating that cycle. And that's why we are born. Like ultimately that's our purpose. We are born as our purpose, not with it. I'll always say it, and it all shows up very unique for us, but we also have this purpose of just learning and experiencing. And when we say no to change, when we say no to going into those dark places, when we say no to the transformation, when we sit back and we stay in our comfort zones, which is sometimes what we need. And sometimes that is the healing, because we actually say, like, nope, it's going to be better. We learn that discernment. It's going to be better for me to stay in my comfort zone rather than it would be more harmful me to grow them. You know what I mean? So, like, there's wisdom and experience and learning in everything. But when we say yes to those things, like we go into those dark places, we go into the underworld or whatever you want to call it. And then we we learn so much about ourselves. And so like when you're in those spaces, what kind of keeps you going forward? Like, is there a practice or like an activity or a mentality or a reminder that you keep with you that really helps when you're going through it?
Yeah, well, I have done a lot of therapy, and not just, traditional therapy, but I've gone on like several retreats, just giving myself time. I've done a lot of, I like to read. So I just always learn through reading different books. And um, one thing that I don't even know where I heard it first, but it's always with me, is that things are happening for you. not to you.
Mm.
And I feel like that's like a cliche one that comes up a lot, but it's so true. It's so getting I feel like before I was in a very like victim mindset. Like, why is this happening to me? Why do bad things happen to me? Nothing ever goes right for me. But it's everything's trying to teach you something. So sometimes you got to go through really crappy things, like, and it's just trying to teach you something or trying to make you stronger. So that's definitely one thing that's always I always, even if I'm like feel myself going in that victim mindset, I stop and I just say, no, nothing's happening to you. You are fine. You're safe. But what is this trying to teach me? What there's something here that I'm supposed to be paying attention to. So that's definitely one thing that's kind of helped me just stopping the reaction and just grounding and thinking first.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember even after the first donor retreat, I did like a 4 week program or something like that. And for some reason, Spirit just like popped in the reminder of like, she wrote that on her after the program feedback, like how you can now just observe and you see the bigger picture. Like those were your exact words. I see the bigger
Yeah,
picture now.
yeah. That's what it
And
is. It's always a bigger picture. It's so much more than just this little moment that we're
yeah,
in.
definitely. I also think it's kind of interesting how the it's happening for you, not to you. I'm pretty sure that's on one of Rebecca Campbell's oracle cards.
Probably.
And so it's like I love how you just like have that oracle embodiment within you too.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And you're so right. It's so true. And so that's been like the most helpful advice or tool for you, like just keeping that bigger picture and like observing it all and everything.
Yeah, just staying out of the like reactionary, like something bad happens, I gotta react to it. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be defensive or
Mm,
offensive, really. You don't have to be so offensive and like go for it. Like just sit with it. It's okay. And even now, that's something, I mean, before I would just push down all those emotions or put them somewhere else, but I think it's important to be able to sit with your emotions. And I even struggle with that now. Like, oh, why am I in such a bad mood? I just got to think this and practice gratitude and what all everything I have. But it's like, no, sometimes you do have to just let yourself be sad or mad. And that's okay too.
yeah. It's all important and it's all sacred for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. So what kind of I don't know, like I don't mean this in like a like only focus on the positive things, but like what kind of positive things have you noticed in your life or like um positive outcomes or shifts or anything like that that are now or have happened in your life because of trying to keep that bigger picture and trying to honor exactly where you are and knowing that it's okay where you are and knowing also how to hold yourself there rather than, you know, like letting yourself sink down and staying there.
Yeah. I think I'm much calmer as a person. And I just feel like my mental health is a lot better because I've just allowed myself to go through the things that have always held me back. And I mean, even this last summer, fall, my mom had a pretty serious surgery and she had a lot of complications, and we weren't sure. I mean, if she was going to make it through. And that was, I mean, my mom's my best friend. She's my rock. I mean, I talk to her at least twice a day, every day, probably. Like we talk to each other all the time. So it was, and I could have easily fallen in during that time to like a bad depression and bad state, just worrying about things. But I even told my husband, I said, I'm really proud of myself for like how I'm just, whatever's supposed to happen is going to happen. It's happening for a reason for her. It's happening for a reason for me, for my dad. I mean, and just keeping that bigger picture, that bigger perspective helped me stay grounded in everything and stay calm for her. And then stay calm for myself at home when I'm with my kids. My kids are, I mean, at the time they were 6 and the twins were 3, so just trying to stay calm for them. And I wouldn't have been able to do that before. I would have been a wreck. And I mean, that's okay if that's what you need to be or that's where you're at, but something that always sticks to me, it's you did the best with what you had at the time. You did the best with the tools you had in your toolkit at the time. When I was a teenager, I didn't have a lot of tools in my toolkit, so I didn't process things as well as I did, or as well as I do now. So I think that's just a big thing. Like, give yourself some grace. Give yourself grace for you did the best you can with what you have.
Yeah, I love that.
I
And
think
that's,
that's good. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
no,
but
you're fine.
I think that's for other people too, dealing with other people that hurt you. Those people, they did the best with what they had. That's people can hurt you and frustrate you and make you mad, but that's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of them. They are doing their best with what they have in their toolkit, just like you are.
Yeah. And sometimes it can be hard to believe or hard to trust in that. But I think it's powerful to come back to that bigger picture, like you were talking about,
Yeah.
and trying to come into that. And yeah, and first off, I'm so happy that your mom is okay now. And
Okay.
and I'm so hoping that you can celebrate yourself for actually having those tools now. And that kind of comes into my next question of, like, what is your support system like? You know what I mean? Like, what does your
Yeah.
support system look like? But also, just how do they really hold you to being in you and your full um, embodiment? Embodiment meaning even like if you're sad, be sad, or if you're happy, be happy. But if you're feeling a lack of self-worth, how do they really remind you of who you really are?
Yeah. I feel like I do have a very good support system. I'm very lucky in that. I mean, I have both of my parents that support me. Like I said, my mom's my best friend, and them. And it's funny because I feel like I have different people for different things. Like I have one friend that's like, Rebecca, you don't always have to be positive. Sometimes just bad things make you feel bad. And I'm like, okay, like because I'm always just like, well, it could be worse, but and she's like, yeah, it could be worse, but it could be better too, and that's okay to be. And like I feel like sometimes you need reminded of that too. Like you don't always have to be up, happy. Like
Hmm.
like I said, it's not always like I said before when I'm like, why am I in a bad mood? It's okay to be in a bad mood sometimes. And then, my family, my husband, and my kids have taught me so much. They say your kids are your biggest teachers. I mean, they teach me so much patience and even just like taking ownership of the things I say and my actions. Like if I hurt their feelings or I do something to hurt them, I make sure I tell them, I'm sorry, I messed up. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have yelled like that. I shouldn't, I'm sorry for the way I reacted. And I tell them, like, sometimes mommy's just having a bad day and I shouldn't have taken it out on you. I think being able to have accountability is huge, especially with little kids. I mean, they're little people too. They deserve to have respect too. So my kids have definitely taught me a lot with that.
Mm, that's awesome. That is so awesome. So now, how do you see yourself stepping into not just your spiritual journey, but taking your spiritual journey to a whole other level where now you feel called to help other people on their journeys? I feel like a lot of times people have this almost this fear of like coming out of the spiritual closet around people.
Yeah.
Like, so have you experienced that? And also, just how do you see it, your spiritual journey and you coming into this next level, impacting those around you?
I mean, it was kind of scary at first, but I just started putting things out there. Like, since, like I said, we did that retreat in 2021. So since then, I'm a Gemini, so I like to learn everything once I do. So I have the cards, I bought books, I started getting into like astrology, I got a birth chart reading. I do so many readings and programs with you. Like, I've done some EMDR, breath work, some meditation, like guided meditations and big journeys. And I got a soul contract reading. I've just gone through all these different avenues trying to learn as much about myself as I can and just my soul. I mean, like I said, I've just been like a sponge these last few years, and I've gotten so much information about myself and who I really am, and like on a soul level. And it was just like, okay, it's time now, like, to share this with other people. Like, other people, like, I've seen how much this work has helped me, like, change my whole outlook on life and just how I respond to things. And I was like, you should help other people do that. Like, other people could benefit from that. Um, I've never really like told anybody this, but like one thing I'd love to do eventually is like make a program or a book or speak to younger kids like in high school. Can you imagine like having this much knowledge? Like, I always think about that. I'm like, man, if I knew like all this stuff, I could have saved myself so much hurt. Just, and I know we have to go through our own things, but just getting the confidence in yourself and going through those like self-worth. Like, I would love to do something for teenagers, like especially teenage girls, and just when you're so vulnerable and going through it. Like, my teenage years in my 20s were early 20s were rough. I wish I had something to like look on look look to like that, just kind of a guide and someone to show me like how to love myself, basically. It's learning how to love yourself. I feel like a
Yeah.
lot of people don't do that. A lot of people don't know how to love themselves. And that's what I want to help other people do, is just find that passion that they have and just love themselves and allow themselves to be who they are, and don't worry about what other people think about you. And so my family and my friends, they've been very supportive. And like I said, like one of my friends signed up for my readings that I'm doing. I'm so grateful for her, like just trusting in me. And my husband, he's not very much into the like woo woo spirituality, but I've noticed him like just his like shifts in things and the way we talk and communicate to each other. And we're both less, reactive now. We're both able to see each other's perspectives on things, and our relationship has grown. And I really think it's from, not saying I changed him, but just my shift helped him shift. He felt comfortable enough to shift because I was shifting. And I think that's just the ripple effect of it. Bring you change, like you changing and growing helps other people around you.
1,000%. That's exactly embodying your purpose. Like, you are just born as your purpose. You're born to experience, you're born to learn, and that's naturally going to impact other people. And the way that you explained how that shows up in your life is so beautiful, but it's also so evident. And I hope everybody listening can actually try to just take a moment and reflect and see that happening in their own lives, because that's exactly how it happens, you
Mhm.
know, with the closest people to you. Either, you start to rub them the wrong way, they start to rub you the wrong way, or it becomes more cohesive. It's there, you just learn so much about yourself. And um your impact just by observing those close relationships and the fact that you can shift and or help other people shift around you to kind of experience their own quote unquote ascension or spiritual journey or just growth. Like we can even look at it a very
As well.
Capricorn logical way.
Yeah,
Yeah, just growth.
my husband's a Capricorn, so he's just, and he'll even send me stuff like on Instagram, like, oh, there's the Capricorn. There's my Capricorn doing this. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't believe in astrology, but okay.
And speaking of astrology, that's actually something that you bring into your readings, right?
Yeah, I'm doing that's the first thing I'm starting to offer people is zodiac season readings. So instead of doing like monthly readings, I'm doing readings based on the zodiacs. Each zodiac sign brings a different energy and a different element of things. And I'm kind of pairing it with that energy from the season with different card readings and sending them out. And I'm also sending out like the big points of like transits or eclipses or full moons, new moons, things that are going to be happening during that season. So I'm excited about it because I've really gotten into, not that I'm any by any means, there's astrology is so confusing. There's so much to it, but I have gotten to, that's one of the bigger things I've been teaching myself about in the past few years is astrology. And I just love how it's just so, everything just goes together with that. Like it really does if you really take a look at it. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. And you're selling yourself short. You know way more than you are leading on. And you are way better. You're better at it than most people I know. And so
I'm
to
okay
come
until they start talking about trines and squares and degrees. I'm like, I'm very basic. But it's so useful to know, and just even your birth chart and everything like that. Like I've looked up my whole family's birth charts because it's just insightful.
It is. It is. Especially when you can notice, like, when you're having a Saturn return or when, Pluto comes back into like alignment with where you are right now. I know like Pluto is really impacting me because I just learned on the pattern app that I have a Pluto complex. So that's fun. I didn't even know that that was a thing, but yeah. So just very
Yeah, speaking
interesting.
of, yeah, Saturn returns, when I went through my spiritual awakening in Sedona, I was right in the middle of my Saturn return. I
Oh
knew
my,
nothing about Saturn returns then, but I mean, it was smack in the middle.
yeah. And it's
So
like, yeah. So to combine that with the intuitive work that you do, I feel like when people get readings from you, they're going to get so much knowledge about themselves and so much new clarity and profound awareness of this is intuitively what I'm picking up on for you in your path, but also this is what else is like the other elements that are going to be involved. So you're really giving like this holistic perspective for people, which I find so valuable. And I don't see that very often, the intuitive and the astro coming together for a reading. So I think
yeah,
it's really, really cool.
thank you. Yeah, I'm excited about it. The cards, I mean, I know people go through some people work with plants more, crystals more, or I've just really been into the tarot and oracle cards even since the beginning. I bought a deck in Sedona and my collection's grown from there. And they're so insightful. They really are if you work with them often enough and just keep working with them, keep talking to them and asking questions. I mean, sometimes I mean, every time I still am just like, wow, I love how that came together because it's not a coincidence. It's just, it's just, I don't know. I don't know how it works, but I don't need to know how it works.
No, and that's the beauty of intuition. You just trust
Yeah.
it and then go with it. Obviously using discernment, but like I remember when I first started doing readings, just for friends and family, like before professionally, I would be like, "Do you realize that there are like 60 some cards in this deck? These are the only ones that came out for you, and they are making perfect sense to you. Like, can you just take a second to just Like, I am so not good at math, but what is the probability of that actually happening, you know?
And like when I started back in November, so this is like where I first got started doing these for other people. I always worked with myself, but I was like, I'm just gonna do like a card reading a day and, you know, write out what messages come through and things and post them on an Instagram. And that's what I started doing. And I mean, there's days where I used a different deck every day and the same type of message comes up every day. And I'm like, well, it said this 4 days in a row. So this is really like they're really trying to hone in what we need to be doing right now. Like, what is the odds of, like you said, even just one deck, but 4 decks all coming out with the same message? I mean, it's wild. It's and it's really something to pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely, especially when you get those repeat messages.
Hmm.
You're right. Like, it shows up those themes, and it's like literally spirit just highlighting. Like,
Yeah.
you're clearly not paying attention, or there's like the similar theme, but here's a different, like, one word
Yeah.
changes and here's a new
Yep.
aspect to it, but it's still the same theme. Or, and I think it's really representative of like that spiral that we go through in life, and the
Hmm.
spiral of healing, like, or I don't even know what the shape would be, but it's a slinky. Let's go with that. It's a
Yeah.
spiral, but it's
Yeah.
just it's long and it progresses, but yeah. So, what do you love most about where you are now in your life and how you are and who you are because of all of this?
I just love how comfortable I am with myself. Just I just feel very free to just be myself. And if, I used to really like going back to the self-worth, I used to really worry about what other people thought of me and how I was perceived by other people. And not that I don't care. I mean, everybody, I feel like, cares to some degree what other people, but I've just learned like I'm going to be me and the right people will stick with me and I'm not going to be for everyone. And those people can go and do their own thing. And it's nothing against them. And I don't have to take it personally. That's the biggest thing, I think. I don't have to take somebody not liking me personally because I'm so comfortable with myself and know who I am. I think that's the biggest thing, just being confident in myself and not just like physically confident. I mean, just that soul level confidence of I know who I am and what I want and where I'm going. I think that's the biggest thing right now. Just like one of the things, another thing I was thinking about when you were talking about like advice is like the worst somebody could tell you is no. Like I feel like I've always was so afraid to just ask for what I wanted or ask for permission or ask for things. And it's like, what's going to happen if you ask? You're not like nothing bad's going to happen. They're either going to tell you yes or they're going to tell you no, and then you can move on with your day. So, yeah, I just think just being confident to put myself out there,
Mm,
try something new.
that's beautiful. And everything you explained, it feels like if we put things on a spectrum, right? Like, um, not necessarily a lack, but these different reflections of self-worth, and it's on a spectrum, right?
Mhm.
And you can be at one end of the spectrum, but I feel like what everything you just said is on the other end of the spectrum, and it feels like your journey has really been about exploring that whole thing
Yeah.
and knowing it and experiencing it for yourself. And it's naturally, because it's been a part of your life, it's naturally going to come into the work with other people. And so I feel like people who are listening who are anywhere on that spectrum, even if you're on the end where you feel like you've mastered self-worth, but just because there is that similarity in that journey, and self-worth can come in so many ways, shapes, and forms. Like, you want to have this shift in your life, but you don't know if you can make it possible. You don't know if it's meant for you. You don't, there's so much unknown about like what you want for your life. I feel like self-worth really comes into that. And I feel like when
Yeah.
you really pare things down, or where if you really let things come to that simmering point, you can find that clarity in it. And I just feel like, yeah, if there are people listening who are anywhere on that, like you would be such a great reference and support system for them, just because it's something that you embody.
Yeah, thank you. And like another thing, like I said, like I'm a mom of three little kids. Like I think when we were in Sedona, I asked you, I'm like, how do I bring this back home? It's easy to, meditate and be with nature and just, you know, really like dig deep in yourself when you don't have, I mean, even people that don't have kids, when you don't have to go to your job or take care of your kids and do laundry and do all these things. I'm like, how do I bring this back home into like quote unquote like mundane life? And I think that is something I've worked towards and what I want to help other people do. Like you don't have to be the picture that comes up of like a spiritual person. Like you can still do everyday life things and it's still you could do both is I guess what I'm saying. Like you can make time for both. You can incorporate both and weave them together, or you can do things separately also, but you can have both. And that's something I want to help people do.
Yes. I think that is such a great explanation of embodiment. Like we can't just focus on, like, we can't all, some of us are, which is amazing. And we need that frequency and everything in the world. But we can't
Mhm.
all just be gurus in a cave in the Himalayas
Yeah.
meditating 24/7, And we are meant to, as a world, experience our spirituality in different ways. But for a lot of us, I would say a vast majority, possibly even, or at least the vast majority listening, are going to have to find that, where you bring it into your daily life, where you
Yeah.
bring it into those moments, where you bring it into just a form of being, you know, and
Yeah.
where it's just naturally a part of you because it's something that you unlock, like it's always been there. All of these things have always been in there within you. And yeah.
Yeah, it's just honoring yourself, honoring your feelings and where you are. And, if I'm like overstimulated or frustrated, I will say, like, I need a minute. Like, and I can go and like breathe and just take a couple minutes to breathe and just ground my energy. And then I can come back and do what I need to do or apologize for losing it a little bit or like nobody's going to be perfect in it. So yeah, I think it just helps everything. Like I said, it helps you honor yourself and give yourself time. You give so much of yourself to everybody else, and it's hard to give that same thing to you.
Yeah, definitely. Aw, you're amazing. So if people do want to book a reading with you, where can they find you and your work?
Yeah, so my Instagram is at everyday.woowoo, WOOWOO. And that's where I do like my daily readings and things. And I have the link there to sign up for the Aries season readings that I'm doing. I'm hoping to do different types of readings in the future, but I'm just like it's just starting out. So I'm just trying to see how these ones go. And I would love to work with other people. So
Amazing.
I'd love to chat with anybody.
Yes, just growing that community and growing the ripple effect.
Yeah.
So I do have one last question, and this is my favorite question when I do guest interviews. So if you need a minute to think on it, like feel free to. But the question is, who is the superhero inside of you that has all the power you could ever need?
I think what you said before with the Phoenix,
Mm,
the Phoenix archetype, just rising up from the ashes and doing what needs to be done and transforming into something even better than before. I've always resonated with the Phoenix. I should have said that when you were asking about my clair abilities. I've always wanted a Phoenix tattoo and just resonated with that even when I was a teenager. But I think that archetype just lives within me. And that's kind of my motivation for things. If things go bad, they'll get better. I can make them better.
Oh, I love that. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and for being vulnerable and sharing the real you. And I hope that everybody listening has been able to find some inspiration. And yeah, if you want to work with Rebecca, definitely recommend her.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on and everything you've taught me over the years. And I love that we've gone from we're friends and you're my mentor. And I love our relationship. And thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the show. Thank you so much for being here and sitting in this circle for our chat today. If you feel called, let me know how this impacted you by leaving a rating or review, and I'll see you next time.